Warning, I'm doing all of this in one take, so mistakes and all are staying in. Why? Because that's what a true ramble is. I may have a script, but I'll probably go on a tangent. Okay, so my TodoFam OCs, which includes the Himura side of things. These are all headcanons based on what we got from the canon. Before we start, if anybody comments, "Ooh, why do Renji and Waku look so much like Enji and Toya? Ooh, they look too similar, me. Yeah, that's the point. They're supposed to be parallels. That's also how genetics work. Family looks like each other. Surprise, who would have thought? Anyway, let's set the stage. I see the Himura clan as being a formal, prestigious family that gained its power via debt collecting, and those who couldn't pay their debts had to work to pay them off, essentially becoming slaves until they paid off what they owed the Himura. Considering the Yakuza used to be in power until the dawn of quirks, that's basically what happened to the Yakuza. One thing about the main family of the Himura is that while they have first names, they are remembered in their family via their titles. So we have Lady and Lord Himura. Lady and Lord Himura have many slaves that owe them money. 3 of these slaves have children, a man who has a son and a couple who have a daughter. The son is called Eigo and the daughter is called Kyoka, who was born with pink hair, which is weird and not normal, but they thought it was some strand of albinism, which most of the Himura have, as well as other issues because they marry extended family and other noble family members, which is the norm to keep the blood pure in their mind. Eigo and Kyoka were born at the same time as Zen and Yuichi and were childhood besties until Kyoka's quirk, heating, manifested when she was a toddler. Hearing that this was starting to happen, the Himura feared that their slaves were going to start having children with powers and rebel against them. Also, I need to point out, Zen and Yuichi and Eigo and Kyoka never met. Eigo and Kyoka were besties. Zen and Yuichi were children on the street. Therefore, they wanted to experiment on Kyoka and understand how this all worked. Her parents and Kyoka's father tried to stop them from taking her, but Lord Himura decided they weren't worth the trouble if they were just going to get in the way of keeping their power. So he killed all 3 of them in front of Eigo and Kyoka. While Kyoka cried and screamed while she was taken away, Eigo just stayed by his father's dead body and starting the cycle of the Todoroki family of being a family of fatherless sons and sonless fathers. Kyoka was kept in a cage in the basement with Lady Himura Kyoka was kept in a cage in the basement while Lady Himura did experiments on her to try and understand quirks. Eigo was kept in the main house and both his father's and Kyoka's parents' debt was put onto him and he was doomed to being a slave his entire life. Eigo was beaten and abused and humiliated growing up so he'd remember his place, but at the same time he was paraded around as the favorite slave because of his looks, good behavior and work ethic. The Himura became very possessive of him as their most valued slave, especially by Lord Himura. He had no idea if Kyoka was still alive or not, but finding and saving her was his sole life purpose. In his entire life, he never cried or reacted to the suffering caused to him, just living day by day while trying to find Kyoka. Meanwhile, Kyoka was tortured, experimented on, and treated worse than a stray dog. They tore her open while she was awake, forced her into situations to use her heating quirk, and drove her completely insane. Lady Himura was her main owner, if you will. Kyoka's quirk is called heating, and it's pretty basic. Her body heats up to the point she can melt metal, but she was always beaten before she could do anything that would aid in escaping. When Eigo and Kyoka were teenagers, Lady and Lord Himura finally had a child, a daughter. She'd end up being known as the matriarch, but right now she's just the heir. The heir manifested an ice quirk shortly after her birth, and despite being repulsed by quirks in general, Lord and Lady Himura saw the potential to gain power through their daughter. When she was about 3, they brought her to Kyoka and taught her to train her ice by using it on Kyoka. They wanted to instill in her that she has power over people and to keep those below them in their place, so that they can keep their power and lifestyle. Their daughter took in those teachings and saw those like Eigo and Kyoka more like animals than people, which then extended to heteromorphs and other groups as she grew older. When the heir was about 5 years old, the Himura were hiring new guards, one of which was a katana wielder. He saw how Eigo was being treated, and when the two started talking, the guard decided he wasn't going to sit by and let these young people be tortured. He was about in his mid-40s. So, I'm a sucker for themes of like next lives, reincarnation, generational curses, etc. So you'll be seeing a lot of that in here. Example number 1. The guard is Hawks' previous life. Just called the guard because he was forgotten to time, only Eigo remembers his name since Kyoko was too out of it. Meanwhile, Enji is haunted by Eigo, while also being a combination of his entire family tree. So when Hawks meets Enji, it's like Eigo recognized that Hawks' previous life was the guard, and that's part of what inclined Enji to give Hawks a chance. Not the main reason, but it helped. Get ready for a whole bunch of that, because it's fun. Anyhow, the guard is actively looking for Kyoko, who, being a bodyguard, has more freedom around the main house, and he ends up finding where Kyoko is held. He goes to Eigo so they can plan an escape. However, Lady Himura had become suspicious of the guard and ambushed them, foreshadowing, with her own weapon, fatally wounding the guard. She also injured Eigo to remind him of his position and promised him that he'd be punished for this. During this time, the heir was getting cocky and went to train her quirk on Kyoko, as she always did. But because she got cocky, she didn't bother with the usual restraints, also because she's 5 years old and has been cuddled to death by her parents. And Kyoko, full of hatred and anger for all they did to her, grabbed her face and burnt her, on the same side as Shoka's scar. Yippee, more parallels, huzzah! So, the heir is rightfully screaming. Kyoko, who is butt naked, covered in scars, filth, her hair is impossibly long and matted, runs away. She follows the main lights of the house and stumbles onto the scene of Lady Himura hurting Eigo. Since Lady Himura was her main torturer, Kyoko just lashes out and rips her jaw open while gouging her eye out. Not because Kyoko has superhuman strength or anything, she's just that full of rage and hate. Parallels. Lady Himura is dead, Eigo and Kyoko recognize each other, and Eigo took his outer layer off to wrap her in it, because again, she is butt naked. Between the heir screaming and Lady Himura's death, the other Himura relatives and staff are freaking out. They're unleashing their dogs to find Kyoko and Eigo. The guard tells them to run while he holds them off, which of course Eigo doesn't want to since he'll be killed, but the guard is bleeding out anyway and tells them to go. The guard is indeed killed by the Himura, specifically Lord Himura, who is furious at his daughter being injured and his wife being killed. The guard ends up being fed to the dogs. Meanwhile, Eigo and Kyoko manage to run away from the Himura household through the neighboring countryside into the closest town to steal some clothes for Kyoko and then back out into the countryside. They lived out in the countryside for a while until they arrived in a war-torn town due to the rise of quirks, and they just ended up living in an abandoned flat. It's not the safest, but it's more than they ever had. Since pain and suffering is all they've known, Eigo and Kyoko settled pretty easily into the war-torn environment. They ended up falling in love and having a son, which Kyoko named Renji. Pregnancy was actually really easy for her compared to what she'd been put through her entire life, and she found it amazing that despite how disgusting she is in her own mind, she was still able to do something like this and create a beautiful, perfect baby. Eigo and Kyoko absolutely adored Renji, who manifested his mother's quirk when he was born. Now, Renji's quirk, Heating, is the same as Kyoko's, except it's more powerful. He has more heat resistance, better control, etc., which has to do with his massive physique and his mindset. Lord Himura chased them down and tried to steal Renji, but Eiko stood up to him, which caused him to be killed. You can decide if it's on purpose or not. Lord Himura at this point did have a quirk, and I like the idea that he heard of All for One as he started getting power, and that Lord Himura begged the villain for a quirk so he could get his property back, and since All for One understands the sentiment, gave him a nice quirk he stole because irony. That or he forcefully triggered a quirk in himself. I think the All for One connection is much more interesting though, but you can make that of what you want, honestly. That's why he was quirkless before, and now he has a nice quirk to kill Eigo with. All for One being inherently intertwined with the Todoroki and Himura is just too good for me to not do that. But again, you could decide what you'd rather with that. It doesn't really matter, it happened. Anyway, despite blocking the entry of ice, Kyoko broke through and saw Lord Himura killing Eigo. She lost it and attacked Lord Himura like Toya did Rei and Shoto because I'm super subtle like that. The thing about Kyoko's quirk Heating is that it's not supposed to produce flames. Kyoko and Renji have flames, but they're supposed to stay inside their bodies. Think a bit like an oven. If they improperly use their quirks and manifest flames like Enji, Toya, or Shoto do, it's a one-way ticket to a very broken and burnt brain. After they manifest flames one time, that's it, it's over. They can function, but they might as well be empty shells of who they were. Kyoko just became completely delusional and insane, believing she was making Renji toughen up by all she did. Renji's upbringing, Renji, from like since his father died up until he left at 16, was just abusive. He essentially raised himself, in truth. He didn't go to school or anything like that, and he pretty much learned to read once he got into the army. But one thing his mother did give him was a twisted sense of survival and scars. He has one on his hand. I think it's his right hand. The same hand that, arm that Toyo and Enji lose in the final war, because I'm super supple like that. And it's a scar that's like a slit in the middle of his hand. All for one connections. Because she stabbed him with a knife. But he also has a bunch of other scars from her, but that's mainly the one. No burnt marks, because obviously he can't burn. But yeah, anyway, he left his mother at 16 to join the army, because he was like, I don't really want to be abused all day anymore. And she burnt herself alive, again, like Toya did, except on purpose, because she's insane. You can take that a few different ways. It can be like that she wanted to punish Renji for leaving him, that she was finally letting herself go, knowing that Renji would be fine. Just pure misery for being alone again. I don't know, you can take it different ways if you want. She just did it because she is like that. Anyway, so Renji joined the army because he looks like he's 20 at 16, and he is essentially just a walking, a walking tank. He just refuses to die. Well, he doesn't refuse to die, but it's like, if he knows that if he dies through, like, getting killed in action, his mother will scream at him in hell, and he just doesn't want to deal with that. So Renji is just surviving everything, and he's so good at surviving everything and doing all of his duties that at the time sort of equivalent to the Hero Commission, government, whatever you want to call it, are like, hey, Suicide Squad, join it, because we need more competent people, because we're getting more heroes now, but it's a mixed bag and we need help. He's basically a precursor to Lady Nagant and Hawks, but differently, because Lady Nagant and Hawks are more like lied to and sort of groomed from a very young age. Renji has a lot more agency than either of them did, but not enough agency from his dead mother to really make any different life choices. So anyway, he knew Garaki, who was sort of like his go-to guy to get stitched up if he needed, and he met All For One, and essentially they agreed to leave each other alone, because at this point, Renji had like made himself a bit of a reputation for just being unbeatable. There is a way to defeat Renji, and that is to not fight him. If Renji comes to you and goes, yeah, I've been told to kill you, fight me, just don't and run away, and he won't chase you. But nobody knows that, so everybody's like, I've got to kill him to save myself. Because basically he took from Kyoka's upbringing, quote unquote, is that he should never strike first. He should always do it in retaliation, revenge, that sort of thing. So if you were to attack him first, you're dead. If you were to run away, he'd be like, guess I failed, and then go home. But people aren't smart, so they don't do that. In the meanwhile, Shio exists. She was the first of her family to gain a quirk. She has a candlelight quirk, and her parents were terrified, and they slapped her for having a quirk. But it wasn't so much for having a quirk, it's more so they were terrified of the quirk itself, because they didn't want her to get persecuted and killed by the people of the people who were doing that to people having quirks. So they were like, no, you hide that or you're going to die. They were basically just extremely fearful people anyway. Very, and that's where Hara gets it from to an extent. Very meek, very gentle, unless they slapped her. Very sort of non-confrontational and just wanting to hide away. And Shio was just filled with fear. She worked in I think I said a cafe or a bar. She worked at something, and sometimes villains would turn up to get drinks and bother her because she's a pretty lady and people are gross. And then Renji one day turned up, and he had his 2 targets were there, and he was like, I'm going to kill you. And he saw that they were bothering her, and he was like, you leave that citizen alone. Let's take this outside. And then she was like, that's kind of considerate. He looks like a bad guy. He probably is a bad guy, but he was nice to me. So that's not a good logic, girl. And then she steps outside and, oh, it's dead. The people are dead. And she's like, wow, well, thanks for sticking up for me. And Renji's like, well, it's my job. And she's like, fair enough. But come back for a free drink if you want. And Renji came back for a free drink, as he did. And 5 years later, they got married. Shio proposed because Renji would never do that to her, so she did. Also, with Shio and Ren, like, sort of being like, okay with people dying, I take it that due to the war zone nature everybody grew up with, having a government killer protector was probably a luxury in this time and age. So, you know, everybody's a bit messed up here. So yeah, Renji would have never proposed to Shio because he was like, I am a mess. I'm self-aware enough to know I'm a mess, and I just can't fit into an everyday normal life. So you've got to be the one to do that. And it took 5 years for Shio to get the nerves to do it. And he said yes, because he loves his little wife. Little, she's like 6 foot. But anyway, they thought they were too old to have kids, but they ended up with conceiving Waku, which was a surprise to everybody, but they're very happy. Renji never felt like he could settle down and live a normal life, which Shio understood, and they made it work. Again, parallels. Rei and Enji never understood each other, but Renji and Shio did, and they made it work. Waku was born just unhinged. He was just born like that, which comes from Kyoka. He has Shio's quirk, which is candlelight, little flame in the hand, and followed Renji's footsteps because he loves his dad and wants to protect his mom, and plus soldiers like him were severely needed at the time. There is no reasoning to why Waku is blah, 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 as he is. He just is like that, and we accept and love him and we move on. Meanwhile, Rokyo is quirkless, and yet it was considered a monster by her family because she was always fearless. She did have a little sibling. You can make of that what you will. Rokyo is the embodiment of when people survive extreme situations because they are very relaxed. Rokyo is fearless but not reckless, and she uses her body at 100% in all things. R.I.P. Waku, constantly pushing limits and chasing that adrenaline high. Her family gave her up to the government. The Hero Commission decided they could use her, but not even the army could manage her since she was so wild, so she was entrusted to Renji, who took her in without question. Rokyo, again, is just like that. She's just a bit cray-cray, and we love her. She and Waku met. Waku challenged her to a fight to test her. She matches energy, which made him fall in love instantly. She beat him, and he proposed. She accepted. Shio and Renji were completely blindsided. Haro was born, and he was adored by his entire family. I've got a bunch of videos. I've made comics of this. I'll probably throw them on screen. Maybe not. Depends how much editing I want to do. But it is there. I have made them. They are bad. The comics do a bit of justice than my explanation. Haro is literally their pride and joy. Back to Himara for a moment. The heir, now called the matriarch, got married to a distant cousin and had a whole bunch of kids. Like her parents feared, with the rise of quirks, her Himara lost their influence, so the matriarch decided to have a vice script on the family instead. Again, a sort of sense of control, maybe call it a trauma response. She started ordering that daughters be married off to whoever could pay the highest, that sons be sold to mercenary groups and such, and that any quirk havers were to be trained and used in any way possible to give power. She made her own army of quirk soldiers, think the Zenin from JJK, but the leader is a woman. Her eldest son was Rei's grandfather, so her father's father, and his title is the Young Master, even though he's in his 50s or something. Due to being coddled and isolated from the rest of Japan, all the Himara view tradition and service to the family as the end-all, as even at their own detriment. So when the matriarch told the youngest master that Renji had a grandson and that his family still owed them a lot of money with interest, they made a plan. Long story short, young master, they tricked, Renji was off on a mission and they tricked Waku and Rokyo into thinking he needed backup, and so, Rokyo was like, I need to get out of this house. I've been in here for like 6 months after giving birth. I am getting cabin fever. I need to go kill something. And Waku was like, yes, lovely wife of mine, I will come aid you. And Shio was left with Haro, and why would she ever worry about the well-being of her family? They are insane and they've always survived everything, so she's just gonna be a good grandma and take care of Haro. Turns out it was an ambush, and I have an animatic it will be posted at some point. That will explain everything. But essentially, the young master has a ice clone quirk. And considering Procure and Natsuo's move... anyway. And he just completely ambushed them with his ice clone quirk, and they were overwhelmed because Rokyo and Waku, for all of their strengths, are still not the strongest ever in the world. They're just insane. And Young Master is even more insane because he's obsessed with getting them back because his mother completely brainwashed him. Generational curse and trauma cycle of abuse, yaha. The Rokyo is beheaded. Waku is gutted essentially, lost his right arm because I do that to people, and Renji arrived too late. Simply, he tried getting there on time, but he couldn't. Rokyo's body moved on its own after she was decapitated, which is ultimately what caused the young master's death. Mainly because she's just a cockroach like that. But also, Kyoka told Rokyo in the afterlife that they'd steal and abuse Harrow if he was stolen, and that became also a driving force as to her body being like, don't touch my child. Yeah, so, again, I did more comics of this, but Renji finds Waku, he finds Rokyo's head first, stops her body from beating up another dead body, and Waku is still alive at this point, and so they manage to have some final words, but it's really miserable, and seeing Waku crying and being like, I wish I could have, I was looking forward so much to being a dad to Harrow, reminded Renji of his own father's, Eigo's last moments. Eigo only ever cried when he realized he was going to die and wouldn't be able to see Renji grow up. So, you know, there's some issues there. He brings the bodies back to Shio, who is completely distraught. And because of the Himura and everything, Renji just decides enough is enough. And he heard of what Kyoko was talking about, but she was insane, so he didn't really take what she said seriously. But basically, she would always be like, the Himura, and he was like, I don't know who the Himura are. Until he did, and he was like, whatever, I'm gonna leave him alone. And then they came and messed with his family, and he was like, never mind. So, that's great. And so, yeah, he went to the Himura and was like, my son and daughter-in-law are dead. Your son is dead. You apologize to what you've done to my family. I will leave. The matriarch was like, Lamau, no, get fucked. Basically just mocking him and his entire family and being like, you guys owe us money and you're below us and you deserve everything for running away. And Renji's like, die, simply. But he was attacked, and then he reciprocated by murdering everybody, basically committing a genocide, almost committing a Himura genocide. So yeah, he killed everyone who attacked him first, which was a rule Kyoka always gave him, to strike as soon as he was attacked, because despite being in his 60s or something right now, Renji's entire life is a reaction to his mother. Thus, anybody who ran away, such as Rei's grandmother running away with her father, who was a toddler at the time, lived. Renji, because he improperly used his quirk and created flames, lost his mind and went home. Shio lost her mind to grief, and even though they loved Harrow, they were never the same and they weren't able to raise him properly. Poor boy. Also the Hero Commission realized what happened, or the government, and they were like, we need to cover this up, like, instantly. And so they did. They striked Renji, Waku, and Roku from all the records. They covered up the entire Himura thing, and it was just forgotten to time. The Himura also wanted to cover it up because it was like a huge shame. It was a complete humiliation to be sort of like taken down by somebody they considered lower than a street dog. So the Himura lost even more power than before. What truly happened was never completely understood because everybody who was there died except for Rei's grandmother. And due to all the shame of it all, the Himara decided to forget this history and pick themselves back up while never acknowledging it. Rei is the eldest and only daughter of the main line, and everybody else are cadet lines or extended family like Getten. And we have the Himara as we know them. The only person who has any indication in this living day in the canon timeline that has any inclination of what actually happened is Rei's father, but he was a toddler, so he barely remembers any of it. But he would be like, wow, this dude is super strong, and he kind of reminds me, when Enji comes along to marry his daughter, he's like, wow, this dude's like strong, and he's giving me flashbacks to something. Yeah, good enough. He seems strong and he has money. That's fine. I'm not gonna question it. Because the Himara are healthy and normal, just like the Todoroki. Harrow being brought up, Renji and Shio had money saved, but because Renji was wiped off the records by the government due to what he'd done and unable to work, they did end up becoming extremely poor and struggled a lot. So then there's Akihime and her parents. So Akihime is Enji's mother. Her parents are called Kimio and Bebe, both of which meaning Kimio meaning kingman and Bebe meaning something queen. Forgot. And they're just very stuck-up people. Kimio is quirkless, and it's given him a massive complex. And he's, in his mind, he's convinced himself that he's better than anybody who has quirks because he's worked to the top of this company that he's a part of without any help from a quirk. So he considers quirks like a good quirk means nothing to him. A work ethic is better. Bebe was the daughter of quite a decent textiles company CEO, and Kimio was a worker in it, and she was like, you have a good work ethic and we have the same sort of mindset, let's get married. And he was like, social climbing, yes I shall. And he did, and they had a bunch of issues with fertility. They really wanted a son to sort of inherit everything, and they spent a lot of money on fertility stuff. And they ended up in their 40s with a daughter that they did not want. They wanted a son. And so Akihime was just from the get-go a disappointment to them because she wasn't born a boy. She was born a girl. And they just disrespected everything about her. Bebe just sees her as a bit like of a competition in a way, because Akihime ends up looking better than her and being stronger than her and in a way being smarter than her. And Bebe's just like, no, she should have been a boy. And Kimio is just a spiteful, inferiority complex riddled little man, and he's just a dick, and they're both terrible, and they deserve each other, and they don't deserve Akihime. And she's just a whole mess. Her quirk is bottle up, and essentially she bottles up quirks. She bottles up her emotions, she becomes stronger. And that's any emotion, happiness, anger, all of that. It's all the emotions. She bottles them up. She becomes stronger. Her hair is naturally blonde, but then the more emotions she bottles up, her hair turns black. And her mother's hair is constantly black, non-stop, and she's never seen it blonde. And that definitely did not lead her to gaining some sort of stressed caused illness that killed her in the long run. Anyway, Akihime and Harrow have known each other since elementary school, but she didn't really pay attention to Harrow until high school when he finally got the confidence to talk to her. Renji and Shio, so Shio died first from grief, when Harrow was about 16, 15. Renji followed her shortly, and Harrow needed to sell everything, to find a small flat. Which Akihime helped him with. Akihime, for all her flaws, was there during every aspect of Harrow's struggles with his grandparents' death, who he was really not very close to. He loved them, but in a sort of sense of like he was loving people who had died a long time ago. And Renji and Shio loved Harrow, but they were just so mentally not there, but they just really couldn't help him with anything. And they couldn't raise him properly, so Harrow's saving grace was school, and Akihime to an extent. But after they died, he really was alone. And yeah, and they were girlfriend boyfriend since high school, beginning of high school, and you know, you leave a bunch of two teenagers alone in a flat, especially when they're 16, 17. Anyway, Akihime got pregnant in their last year of high school, before they were still in high school. Haru was still 17. I can't remember. I'm bad with ages. Anyway, they're both in high school. Akihime became disowned by her parents for being pregnant with Enji because she didn't want to get rid of him. And they were like, we don't like Haru. He is a loser and pathetic. And this child of yours, we don't care. We disown it as well. And Akihime was like, I'm literally your only child. And they were like, don't care, get out. And they were like, okay. So Akihime went to live with Haru, who he felt really guilty about everything. Initially, Akihime was like, oh, I'll be fine, we'll figure it out. But then between the stress of being disowned, not being used to the sort of not being used to Haru's lifestyle, which is having nothing after being brought up with everything money-wise, Akihime really struggled with that. And also because of the pregnancy hormones and everything, it really messed with her quirk, and she just became extremely abusive. She never hit Haru directly, I don't think I've written that, but she did throw things at him and shout and scream, and it was really bad. She always apologized afterwards, but it's like, that doesn't really, you know, anyway, it doesn't justify it. But she just really beat down on Haru's well-being. And his quirk is kind of like, it's the same as his father's and his grandmother's, but obviously he never met his parents. Well, he doesn't remember his parents, so he doesn't know. He worked so hard. He got 2 jobs and everything. He was working throughout high school as well, which was not 100% legal. And he was just like really trying to get life together and to provide what he could for Akihime. Akihime's so the Enji's birth was really traumatic to Akihime. It was really, really rough. To the point that she just couldn't even look at Enji afterwards, especially because, like, to her, he didn't look anything like her, so she just didn't connect with him. It's especially just extreme case of postpartum. And it just it's just bad. It was just bad. She wouldn't even feed him. Like, she refused to let Enji latch onto her and everything. It was really bad. And Haru tried. Anyway, she left right before they were gonna bring him home. She just disappeared, and all the nurses seemed to know where she went, but they didn't tell Haru. Haru went to go look for her at her original home, but she was gone. The family was gone. They'd left. Enji was unnamed for a while because Haru didn't know what to do. So poor Enji didn't have a name for a little bit. But he named him after his grandfather with some kanji changes in hopes that Enji would grow up big and strong, unlike himself, because Haru thinks he's a pathetic little man. And because that's what he's been told his entire life. Not necessarily by Renji, by his grandfather, but Renji was like, I need you to man up. After his grandson who's like 5. Oh. Anyway, so yeah, Haru struggled the entire time. He was a really good dad up until his he really tried all on his own. He really did. But the world around him just saw him being nice and struggling, and was like, we're gonna beat down on him. And it's a whole thing of like how hurt people. Everybody around Haru was just terrified because this was before All Might, so everything was still very war-torn and injuries, deaths, villains. It's just a mess. So everybody was terrified. And seeing Haru trying to be nice to people and trying to get by in life just triggered everybody's nastiness. And yeah, and just people just never gave him a helping hand or any sort of kindness. Even the old landlady, because the old landlady liked Haru at first, but then Akihime insulted her, and then she stopped liking him. Because people are like that. And Enji just grew up defending his dad all the time, but after Enji started like kindergarten, the equivalent, I don't know what they have in Japan, Haru was just working non-stop, like constantly, to just provide for his son who's constantly growing and everything. and was just extremely mentally weak and vulnerable. He's an elementary school coach, PE coach. The kids really liked him, but even the parents were a bit like, you're letting a single dad train our kids. All right. So people were just really judgmental of his life situation, and he just couldn't do anything about it. And then the accident happened. Yay. How I write it, Enji was just starting middle school when the villain attack on Haru's school happened, and Haru died trying to save one of his students. In the main canon anyway, depends on the AU. So yeah, so now that's the TodoFam family tree explained. I've got a bunch of comics and stuff like that out there, so you guys just gotta go looking for them. However, that's not the end of it. Remember how I said I like generational curses and hauntings? Right, so Enji does his whole obsession thing with being the strongest and beating All Might, but realizing he couldn't due to his limits, which were mostly because of overheating issues. So he went to find a wife with a nice quirk via marriage, matchmaking, and Ray turned up. Want to know a funny thing? The money he gave for the dowry was the same amount as the debt his family, quote unquote, owed to the Himura. So Enji, by giving Himura the money, the dowry for Ray, which is typical in certain circles, by doing that, he freed his family from the Himura's grasp and unknowingly turned the tables against the Himura. So that they've flipped positions now. The Todoroki are now the ones with the power, and Himura are not. Basically, the idea with the everything is that Kyoka, I see vestiges as sort of like ghosts as well. So Kyoka is haunting the Todoroki because that's her family. She was delighted when Renji killed the Himura, by the way. She was like, that's my baby boy right there doing what I asked him. Anyway, want to know a funny thing? So the funny thing is about Kyoka is that she's haunting the Todoroki, and when she saw Enji, who had no idea what was going on, because Haru didn't know what was going on with the Himura, because his grandparents were brain dead. So Enji is like, oh, I'm gonna go find a wife, because I have issues, and he finds Ray, who happens to be Himura, and Kyoka is like, absolutely not, do not do it. But because she's dead, she can't stop him. So Enji goes and does it, and she's like, I'm going to murder everybody. I'm gonna make life a living hell for everybody. And she hates Ray. Kyoka hates the Himura. Hates them. You could be like, it's not fair. Ray didn't do it. She doesn't care. Kyoka doesn't care. Kyoka is a vengeful spirit. She does not care. She's pissed at Enji. Enji's her baby boy, but she's pissed at him. She's like, you should know better. He has no idea. He doesn't know. But basically, her way of punishing is she denied Toya's heat resistance. So Toya's, what Kyoka did is that in the Todoroki family, the eldest son and the father have a very special relationship. And it's sort of, the love of the firstborn, and also like with the sort of, and just, again, fatherless sons, sonless fathers, and Kyoka just denied, just wanted to ruin that relationship between Enji and Toya, of having like because like there was nothing stopping Toya from growing up. There was no threat to him. So Toya could have grown up and have a really healthy dynamic with his family, including his dad. But she was like, no, you don't get to have that. I'm gonna take his heat resistance away because fuck you. And she just ruined the father-son relationship that the Todoroki kind of depend on. And also you'll see that the eldest sons always have blue eyes of their father. Totally not hinting at something there. She tortures Ray by essentially, so Enji and Toya both have her anger basically, and through Toya's weaknesses that she caused, and also Ray's genetics that are just a bit messed up because inbreeding, she uses Toya to torture the father and the mother. and just leads Rei into insanity that way. Also, because Toya is Enji's weakness, she then is able to, Kyoka is then able to use Enji, and it's a whole mess. Is not the right word. Influence from the beyond. And she just leads, it gets to a point where Rei does what Kyoka did, and hurts a 5-year-old child, except this time it's her own. And there's a lot of parallels between the characters. If you squint, I've done a video about it. And Fuyumi is protected by Haro and Shio because she's the most like them, so it's a whole that. And Rokyo is the thing is, Shoto is supposed to be a lot like Rokyo, but that can't happen because Kyoko messed with Toya. Also with the point, it's very soothing and cathartic for Kyoka to destroy the Todoroki, basically. And Kyoka returns to her true self the more the family suffers. And she becomes completely her original self without the scars and everything when Toya dies. Basically, he's like a sacrifice to her happiness and to soothe this vengeful spirit. Not that the Todoroki have any idea of what's going on. It's literally just Kyoka doing it, and nobody can really stop her because she's like the matriarch. The Himura ancestry essentially disowned Rei, considering her parents never went to check on her, and so their vestiges are just like, Rei doesn't exist to us, she's dead to us. So I'm seeing that as her birth family just completely abandoning her, so she was alone with Kyoka, haunting her for years. Then Eigo and Enji are similar to each other. Kyoka plus Waku are similar to Toya. Renji and Natsuo are extremely similar. Shio plus Haro are similar to Fuyumi, and Rokyo is supposed to be similar to Shoto. There's also this thing that every Todoroki has a Himura who is obsessed with them. So Eigo has Lord Himura, Kyoka has Lady Himura, Renji has the matriarch, Waku plus Rokyo has the young master. We'll skip Haro for now. Kyoka and Enji you'd think would be Rei, but nope, it's actually Toya. And it's just a whole mess. With Haro, if you squint, the person obsessed with him would be All For One. But this one is kind of in the air. I don't headcanon or think Yuichi and All For One are Himura, but aesthetically speaking, they could fit. This one's just what you want, really, but there are some parallels between All For One and Yuichi, Haro, Lord Himura, Kyoko, and Eigo. There's so many parallels. And it's on purpose. It's not by accident. I did it on purpose. I did want to parallel Yoichi and Kudo's runaway scene with Eigo and Kyoka. And everything, if you're like, hey, is this similar to each other? It probably is, and it's probably on purpose. Unless you're just getting it wrong. But the answer is probably yes. So, to Kyoka and Ko, Toya isn't a Todoroki, but a Himura, which, considering the attitude he has, aligns with what the Himura attitude is. In a way, it was supposed to be Rei, but Toya usurped her importance in Enji's life by being his first son and original quote-unquote successor. And also because, Rei just didn't have a fighting chance in this family, and goodness gracious, girl, my goodness. In the end, the true Todoroki successor in the ancestors' eyes is Fuyumi, hence why she has blue eyes. The anime is wrong, her eyes are blue, shut up. And that's sort of the end of my insanity. A lot of this is just me going insane bullshit go because I find it fun. Do I think any of this is plausible for the actual My Hero Academia lore? Yes, but no. But I don't think it actually happened. We'll never know because Horikoshi's not giving us anything. Yeah, I have comics and stuff and videos and everything. You can, guys, want more of that, you can. This is just a basic rundown of what's happening. If you have any questions about anything I did not address, please ask away. If you have a question, but I already addressed it in the video, I'm just gonna ignore it. I've got too much going on. I can't be repeating myself constantly. Please, begging you. Thanks for listening to my yapping. Look forward to some more animatics with these guys. Bye.